Ezekiel Edwards, let's talk about this issue of innocence, when innocence matters, when it doesn't, and the eyewitness testimony on which this case is based.
Well, just for a little bit of background, since the Innocence Project was founded in 1992 by Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, 223 people have been exonerated through post-conviction DNA testing. We've looked back at those cases and found that in 75% of them, mistaken eyewitness identification was a leading contributing factor. Troy Davis's case was based almost entirely on identification evidence. As you said earlier, of the 7 witnesses who came to court, well, the 9 witnesses, but 5 of whom were witnesses. 7 were eyewitness witnesses, 5 have recanted their testimony. 7 of the 9 total witnesses have recanted their testimony. There has been now 30 years of copious social science research looking at the factors that affect reliability of eyewitness evidence. Troy Davis's case presents many of those factors, both in terms of what actually happened during the incident and the witness's opportunity to view, and also the procedures that the police used, all of which contravened best practices. What's outrageous is that, first of all, his defense lawyer actually didn't even try to suppress the eyewitness identification evidence at trial. He didn't ask that it not go to the jury. When it did go to the jury, he didn't ask for an expert to tell the jury what those factors were. He didn't ask for special jury instructions. And what's also outrageous is that not one of these witnesses has been heard in a court of law, not in Georgia, not by the Supreme Court. And so you've got somebody who has a compelling case of innocence with 7 people coming forward and saying that they didn't tell the truth at trial, and no court has bothered to hear those witnesses.
And why is eyewitness testimony so unreliable?
Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, just the way that the human memory works, and there's been many studies. I mean, there have been psychologists from Hugo Munsterberg 100 years ago to Supreme Court justices in the late 60s who have been talking about the fragility of such evidence. When somebody sees an incident, the way that you encode it, the way that you then preserve it, and the way you retrieve it, there's all of these opportunities for contamination along the way. In Troy's case, for instance, the incident happened at night. It happened very quickly. There was a weapon present, so that would have been very stressful and distracting for the witnesses. On top of that, when the police conducted their identification procedures, it was the same officer doing all of them, and he knew who the suspect was, Troy Davis, and he knew that that's who they wanted the witness to pick. But even more egregiously, every single witness who identified Troy Davis at trial, who have now said that they lied, had seen a picture of Troy Davis prior to the lineup procedure, inclusive of his photo. Some had seen it on wanted posters, some had seen it on the media, some had seen it in the possession of the police. And then they were asked in very suggestive circumstances, who did this? Now they're saying, in fact, they really didn't see who did it.
And some are saying that it's someone else who pointed the finger at Troy.
Yeah, adding to the outrage of this case is that one of the 9 witnesses who was not recanted, there are only 2, I'm sorry, one of the 9 witnesses, 2 have not recanted, is a guy named Red Coles. And he is now suspected to be the shooter. In fact, at least 5 witnesses, I heard actually as many as 9, have now said that they either saw him do the shooting, or Red Coles, or that he confessed to them, including a family member and 2 good friends. No court has heard from those witnesses either. So they haven't heard from the recanting witnesses, and they haven't heard from the witnesses pointing.
And what does Red Coles say? And where is he?
I don't know where he is. He certainly hasn't. Sorry if she is.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Red Coles lives in Savannah. He's alive and well. And he, as you said, he was implicated by at least 9 people in sworn affidavits. Some people said that he's bragged that he killed the police officer, and it's interesting that Red Coles is the person who pointed the police to Troy Davis as the leading suspect, and from there they built a case that it was Troy Davis. They did not cast a wide net to consider alternative suspects, including this man, Sylvester Coles, who had a motive himself to have shot the police officer.
And the motive was what?
Well, the police officer was coming to the scene of the crime to, somebody had attacked this homeless man. And if you take the theory that Sylvester Coles was the person who committed that act, he was trying to keep out of trouble. So, I mean, there's a very strong theory that there is this alternative suspect, and the police didn't really search that out, and the courts are unwilling to hear it.
And Laura Moye, is your sense that part of the resistance to actually reopen this case is the reality that the prosecutorial misconduct and the police misconduct will also come on trial as well?
Well, that's very possible. I mean, the system and the folks involved have a lot to lose if it comes out, you know, that there was a police or prosecutorial misconduct. It really does not look good for them.
Ezekiel Edwards.
Well, I'd just add two things. One is that there was a lot of pressure put on these witnesses. They've all come forward and said that they were, the police and prosecutors exerted immense pressure on them, and so I'm sure they don't.
And they've been threatened with perjury, and this alternative suspect has threatened some of them too, as has been alleged.
And I also want to make the point that we're not even asking, like right now, Troy, it's not even about a new trial. He's been denied even a hearing where these witnesses can come forward to try to get a new trial. So, Why
would the Supreme Court stop this? I mean, he was within 2 hours of being executed, and the Supreme Court stopped it, and then moved forward. Why did they bother to stop it, Laura Moye?
That's not so unusual, because the county where Davis was convicted and sent to death row, Chatham County, that's Savannah, that the judge of the Superior Court there issued an execution warrant to have Troy executed a week before the U.S. Supreme Court came back to session in September. So I think the U.S. Supreme Court said, you know, give us at least a week to come back and consider the cert petition that was filed with them over the summer. So the folks down in Chatham County are very anxious to get this execution done and over with. I think the U.S. Supreme Court felt, especially with all the attention, I'm sure, that, you know, give us at least a week to come back to session and consider the cert petition.
But the Supreme Court didn't actually explain why they didn't take the case. They simply did it. And in addition to the fact that this is a very disturbing move by the Supreme Court, obviously for Troy Davis and for our criminal justice system, they were also rejecting to hear the decision by the Georgia Supreme Court, a 4-3 decision, that basically said if you have recantation testimony, if you have people who have come forward now and said, actually at trial I was lying, unless you can pretty much absolutely prove that what they were saying at trial was false, like they've been convicted of perjury since then, or they were in another state and you can prove it, that testimony is not enough to get you a new hearing. So that has reverberations for many people in the state of Georgia, not just Georgia.
Laura Moye, we have 10 seconds. What are people doing right now? What are you suggesting people do?
Well, people should go to the website, amnestyusa.org, and you can still send your letter to the parole board. It'll be copied to the governor. We have a funeral procession planned in a couple hours. We're going to be delivering a casket with the word justice on it. We're going to be delivering over 140,000 petitions to the parole board. There are people who are writing letters to the doctors who are involved, Georgians for Alternatives to Death Penalty.
We're going to have to leave it there. Laura Moye of Amnesty International, Ezekiel Edwards of the Innocence Project, thanks so much. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez, our website, democracynow.org. Thanks for joining us. This is Democracy Now!